3 newborn triplets, abandoned together in a filthy garbage dump, bodies barely visible among rotting waste and scattered debris. The air thick with decay, rats scurrying through mountains of refuse, insects buzzing in relentless swarms. 25 years have passed since that frozen night, but the scars remain etched deeper than anyone could imagine. In the distance, a hunched figure moved slowly through the mud-caked paths. Doña Esperanza, an elderly beggar who had made this forsaken corner of the city her realm, stopped dead in her tracks. Her weathered eyes widened at the sight before her. 3 tiny bodies discarded like garbage, their fragile forms barely moving in the bitter cold. She pressed her trembling hand against her chest, feeling her heart crack open. Nobody knew where these children came from. Nobody cared whether they lived or died in this wasteland of human indifference. But Doña Esperanza couldn't walk away. Despite owning nothing but the worn clothes on her frail body, despite barely having enough strength left in her aging frame, she knelt down in the filth. Her knees sank into the cold muck as she reached for the 3 small lives that society had thrown away like broken toys. "Don't be afraid, little ones," she whispered, her voice breaking with emotion she couldn't contain. "I won't abandon you, I promise." The early days tested every ounce of strength the old woman possessed. Feeding 3 infants with nothing but scraps salvaged from market dumpsters became her entire existence. Doña Isabel, a bread vendor whose stall sat near the edge of the market district, occasionally tossed stale loaves toward the old beggar. Her eyes carried pity mixed with concern. "You can't keep carrying this burden forever, Esperanza," she said one evening, watching the determined fire that burned in the elderly woman's gaze despite her obvious exhaustion. Esperanza's response came in a heavy sigh that seemed to carry the weight of the world. "I know what you're saying, but I cannot let them die. On freezing winter nights, when the cold cut through their makeshift shelter like invisible knives, she used her own body as a shield, wrapping herself around the children even as her bones ached from the penetrating chill. She gave them names that carried meaning beyond their desperate circumstances: Santiago for strength, Mateo for gentleness, and Lucia, whose large round eyes seemed to absorb and understand the world's cruelty even as an infant. Santiago emerged as the fighter from his first breath, demanding food with kicks and cries that could wake the entire alley. Mateo was different, weaker, his tears coming easily, but quieting the moment she held him close and hummed wordless lullabies. And Lucia, with those impossibly expressive eyes, watched everything with an awareness that seemed beyond her years. Esperanza knew the orphanages in this city were nightmares dressed as salvation, places where children vanished into systems that ground up innocence and spat out hollow shells. Years crawled forward. The children grew on a diet of love mixed with poverty, their small bodies adapting to a life most couldn't imagine surviving. Winter came again, as brutal as the one that had nearly claimed their lives at birth. The 3 siblings huddled in corners, sharing body heat around pitiful fires built from scavenged wood. Hunger became a familiar companion, teaching them to sleep through the empty gnawing in their stomachs. When Santiago turned 6, everything began to unravel. Doña Esperanza collapsed one evening, her body finally surrendering to years of sacrifice. She coughed violently, each spasm shaking her entire frame like leaves in a storm. Lucia pressed against her side, small hands gripping the old woman's arm with desperate fear, coloring her young voice. "Abuela, what's wrong? Please get up." The old woman forced words through her damaged lungs. "Nothing, my child. Just tired, so tired." Mateo crawled close, trying to share his warmth, pressing his small body against hers as if his love alone could heal her failing heart. But the children didn't understand that death was coming, creeping closer with each labored breath their abuela took. The next morning arrived wrapped in grey light and terrible silence. Santiago woke to a cold that seemed different, more permanent. He reached out to shake the old woman awake, his stomach demanding breakfast with its familiar, painful urgency. "Abuela, wake up. I'm really hungry." But her hand felt like ice beneath his touch. Her chest no longer rose and fell with breath. Lucia crawled over, confusion turning to horror as she touched the motionless arm.
"Abuela, why won't you wake up?"
Mateo sensed what his siblings couldn't yet accept. He retreated to the far corner of their shelter and began crying with a depth of grief that seemed impossible for someone so small. Doña Esperanza had died in her sleep, leaving them completely alone in a world that had already proven its cruelty.
"Nobody mourned the death of an old beggar woman."
Her body was removed and buried without ceremony, without incense, without tears, except those streaming down 3 small faces that had lost their only protector. The streets became their new reality. On that first day, without their abuela, the 3 children pressed together in an alley corner, stomachs screaming for food they didn't know how to find. Santiago tried to project strength he didn't feel. Lucia trembled against Mateo, her voice small and frightened. "What happens to us now?" Santiago clenched his tiny fist, jaw set with determination that looked almost comical on his young face. "We find food. We survive." But survival proved infinitely harder than any child should have to learn. They began sitting outside restaurants, hoping someone's compassion might translate into a scrap of bread or leftover rice. Most of the time they received only disgusted looks and shooing gestures, as if their poverty might be contagious. One day, rain pounding down in sheets, Santiago pressed his face against the bakery window. The warm bread behind the glass seemed to mock his empty stomach. Don Manuel, the baker, appeared from behind the counter, his face twisted with irritation.
"Get away from here! I don't give handouts to street rats!" Santiago stumbled backward, tears threatening but refusing to fall.
Then, an unexpected kindness arrived in the form of Doña Rosa, an elderly woman whose back bent under years of her own struggles. She pressed stale bread into his hands, her voice carrying warning wrapped in mercy.
"Take this, child.
But remember, never trust that everyone will be kind." Santiago ran back to his siblings, the precious bread clutched against his chest like treasure. As months turned into years, the city taught them harsh lessons about their place in the world's hierarchy. When Mateo tried stealing a fallen apple from Don Carlos's vegetable stand, the vendor's response was swift and brutal. His heavy hand struck the boy's face, sending him sprawling into the dirty street.
"Think you can steal from me, you filthy little pest?"
Lucia tried to shield her brother, but Don Carlos's anger didn't discriminate. He kicked Mateo hard enough to send him rolling.
"Get out of my sight!"
"If I catch you again, I'll break your hands." Santiago's fists clenched until his knuckles turned white, but he knew fighting back would only bring worse consequences. They had nobody to protect them, nobody to defend them, nobody who cared if they lived or died. That night, fever claimed Mateo. Lucia tried wrapping him in her thin shirt, trying to warm his shaking body. Her whisper cut through the darkness.
"Are we going to die, Santiago?"
He wanted to promise they wouldn't, wanted to guarantee survival, but words felt hollow against the reality crushing down on them. "We'll live. No matter what happens, we'll live." In the shadows across the city, cold eyes watched their suffering. A man named Julian observed these abandoned children with calculating interest, waiting for the perfect moment to sink his claws deeper into their tragedy. Winter returned with vengeance, bringing winds that cut through their inadequate shelter like invisible blades. The 3 siblings continued their desperate dance with survival, scavenging scraps and enduring the city's casual cruelty. Hunger drove Santiago to make the decision that would change everything. His eyes locked onto fresh bread sitting on Doña Camila's bakery counter. Mateo and Lucia hadn't eaten in 2 days. If he didn't get food soon, one of them might collapse. When the baker turned away, his hand shot out, fingers closing around the warm loaf. But Don Emilio, the butcher across the way, had been watching.
Little thief.
His massive hand clamped around Santiago's arm like a vice. The bread hit the ground. Santiago struggled, panic flooding his system, but escape was impossible. Doña Camila's face flushed red with righteous anger.
Police! Someone call the police!
Santiago fought against Don Emilio's grip while strangers gathered, their faces showing disgust and judgment. In the distance, Lucia and Mateo watched in horror, frozen by fear and helplessness. Lucia screamed her brother's name, but Mateo held her back, knowing they couldn't help, knowing interference would only make things worse. Sirens wailed. Lieutenant Vargas emerged from the patrol car, his expression showing only weary indifference at the sight of another street child in trouble. Another one?
Take him to the juvenile facility. They shoved Santiago into the back seat.
Through the window, he saw his siblings' terrified faces, their small forms getting smaller as distance grew between them.
Don't leave me!
His scream echoed uselessly as the car pulled away. Without Santiago, Lucia and Mateo became even more vulnerable. They hid in alleys, clinging to each other for warmth and comfort that neither could truly provide. Lucia's voice barely rose above a whisper. We have to save him somehow. But they had no idea where to even begin. Days blurred together in their desperate search for food and shelter. Then Mateo vanished. A middle-aged man with a smile that didn't reach his eyes had approached the boy in the old market district.
Want somewhere warm to sleep?
Hot food? Mateo had heard warnings from other street children about men like this, predators who offered salvation and delivered slavery. But hunger clouded his judgment, made him desperate enough to take the risk. Really? You'll help me? The man nodded with false kindness. Come with me.
I'll take care of you. Mateo followed, unaware he was walking straight into the hands of a human trafficker.
Lucia searched everywhere, asking vendors and begging strangers for information about her brother. Nobody knew anything. Nobody cared about another missing street child. Even the police showed no interest when she tried reporting his disappearance. By nightfall, she sat alone in a dark alley, tears long since dried up, surrounded by crushing loneliness. In different corners of the city, puppet strings were being pulled by Julian, a powerful man who watched these 3 abandoned children being slowly destroyed by forces he controlled. The juvenile facility where they sent Santiago wasn't a place for reformation. It was a factory that manufactured criminals from broken children. His first day there, older boys attacked him, fists teaching him that weakness meant death in this place. You won't survive here, one sneered before driving his fist into Santiago's stomach. Santiago collapsed, gasping, but something hardened inside him during that moment on the cold floor.
He refused to die.
He began learning survival skills no 12-year-old should need, fighting back, becoming harder, colder. That's where Julian found him, recognizing potential in the rage burning behind the boy's eyes. A child raised in suffering who'd lost faith in humanity made the perfect tool. Want freedom? Julian's voice carried false promises. Santiago's response came through gritted teeth. Yes. From that moment, Santiago stopped being a homeless child and became Julian's weapon, executing the darkest tasks while slowly forgetting the siblings he'd left behind. Mateo's fate proved equally cruel. The man who'd promised help delivered him to a dark factory where children labored under impossible conditions. Beatings punished mistakes. Starvation punished slowness. The other children wore expressions of hollow defeat. One whispered without hope, "We'll never escape." Mateo tried resisting that truth, but each day stole more of his spirit until only an empty shell remained. Lucia felt eyes watching her constantly. Every corner she turned, shadows seemed to follow. Once, while trying to sleep under a bridge, rough hands grabbed her.
Think you can hide forever, little rat?
She bit down hard on his hand, tasting blood, then ran without stopping until her lungs burned and her legs nearly gave out beneath her. Julian had given orders. She couldn't be allowed to live free. His network systematically cut off every escape route, herding her toward inevitable capture. 25 years passed like a nightmare that refused to end. The city transformed around them, old streets replaced by gleaming towers and neon lights stretching across busy avenues. But darkness still lived in forgotten corners where discarded people fought for survival. In a luxury apartment overlooking the sparkling cityscape, Santiago sat with a half-finished cigarette, eyes empty of emotion. Scars covered his hands and neck, permanent reminders of violence that had become his language. He was no longer the frightened boy. He'd become Julian's right hand, someone who did whatever necessary without hesitation or mercy. Family, love, compassion, these concepts had become foreign to him. Only power and money held meaning now. A man entered, dropping documents on the table. "Boss wants you to handle this." Santiago glanced at the papers detailing someone's betrayal of Julian. His smile carried no warmth. "Easy." Across the city in a deteriorating room, Matteo sat on a creaking bed, staring at nothing. Years of forced labor had destroyed his body and shattered his spirit. He was breathing, but not truly alive, just an empty vessel going through motions without purpose or hope. In the crowded market, a young woman with piercing cold eyes moved through the crowd. Lucia had survived against impossible odds, learning to fight, to face fears that would have broken most people. She had one singular focus now, finding her brothers. 25 years hadn't erased their faces from her memory. She knew they were alive somewhere in this vast city. She just had to find them and pull them from whatever darkness had claimed them, even if it meant facing Julian himself. Her search led her to an underground bar where criminals gathered. Lucia walked in, feeling every hostile gaze, but fear had stopped controlling her years ago. At the back, a tall man lounged with dangerous confidence radiating from every movement. Santiago. But this version seemed like a cruel stranger wearing her brother's face. She approached, voice trembling despite her determination. "You're Santiago, aren't you?" He looked up with contempt, twisting his features. "So you finally found me." Tears threatened, but Lucia held them back.
"It's me, Lucia. Don't you remember?"
Santiago studied her with calculating coldness before laughing bitterly. "Family is for weak people."
"I don't need you." His words cut deeper than any physical wound. "No, that's not true. You're not like this."
"You're Santiago, my brother." He stood, towering over her. "Listen carefully, Lucia. That person died long ago. What you're looking for doesn't exist anymore." She broke down completely.
"I don't believe you."
"You're lying to yourself." Santiago turned his back. "Leave, Lucia, before I can't forgive you for staying." Despite his rejection, Lucia refused surrender. She continued searching until she found Matteo in a slum dwelling. When she entered, he sat motionless, eyes vacant. "Matteo!" He slowly looked up, recognition dawning painfully. "Lucia, is that really you?" She ran to him, embracing him desperately.
"Yes, it's me. I've been searching for years." Matteo's whisper carried crushing defeat. "I don't deserve to be found." Lucia gripped his hand fiercely.
"Yes, you do. We're still family. We can start over." But Matteo only shook his head, unable to believe hope existed anymore. Lucia knew she had to do something drastic to save both brothers from the abyss, but she didn't know Julian had noticed her interference. In his high-rise office, Julian stood before floor-to-ceiling windows, surveying the city like a king observing his kingdom. A large man stood behind him. She found both of them. "What now?" Julian's eyes reflected pure ice.
"End this."
"Don't let her get any closer." The order was given. Subordinates mobilized to eliminate Lucia permanently. She didn't realize danger followed her from the moment she left Matteo's room. Walking down an empty street, instinct screamed warnings. Suddenly, a black car accelerated straight toward her. She dove sideways, barely escaping. The car doors flew open. Two men emerged with murder in their eyes. "Get in the car now!" Lucia backed away, heart hammering. "Who are you?" One man's laugh held no humor.
Doesn't matter who we are. What matters is you can't escape. She ran, plunging through narrow alleys, legs pumping while her lungs screamed for air.
The pursuers stayed close behind. Meanwhile, Santiago sat alone, nursing a drink, mind churning with unwanted thoughts. He didn't want to think about Lucia, but childhood memories kept surfacing against his will. A familiar voice interrupted his turmoil. "Santiago." He turned to see Julian approaching with predatory grace. "You met the girl?" Santiago remained silent. Julian produced a gun, placing it deliberately on the table between them.
"I raised you, taught you survival.
Now choose, your old family or your new one." Santiago stared at the weapon, understanding the ultimatum's deadly simplicity. Across the city, Mateo sat unaware that his door was opening silently behind him, a figure slipping inside with cold steel glinting in the darkness. Lucia ran until her legs threatened collapse, finally cornering in an alley with a high wall blocking escape. She spun around as Julian materialized from shadows, Santiago beside him wearing an expression devoid of emotion.
Her voice broke. "You?"
Julian advanced slowly, each footstep echoing. "You've searched too long, Lucia. Let me tell you something." He threw documents at her feet. She hesitated before picking them up, hands shaking as she read. Medical records, birth certificates, old photographs. Her insides twisted. Julian's voice carried poisonous satisfaction. "I'm your biological father." The world tilted. Everything collapsed around her. "No, that can't be true." Julian shrugged casually.
"Why do you think I always watched you?"
"Why didn't I let you die from the beginning?" "Because you're my children." She stepped back, horror consuming her. This man who'd destroyed their lives, who'd pushed them into darkness, was their father. Santiago stood silently behind, eyes shadowed. Lucia turned to him, desperately seeking resistance. "Santiago, you can't believe him." But Santiago's voice came flat.
"I've known for a long time, Lucia." Her heart shattered completely.
Julian continued with cruel pleasure. "Read it."
"Every line tells the truth." She gripped the papers, hands trembling violently.
"They were his children. But why abandon them?"
"Why did you throw us away?"
Julian answered with indifference. "You were burdens."
"I couldn't allow you to exist then." He laughed coldly.
"But fate has a sense of humor, doesn't it?" Fury replaced shock.
"You're not my father."
"You're a monster." Julian's smile remained, but his eyes turned glacial. "Like it or not, my blood runs in your veins." She threw the documents down. Despite everything, she couldn't let this destroy her. "Whoever you are, I won't let you control our lives anymore." Julian sighed theatrically. "Pity, I thought you'd accept reality more gracefully." He raised his hand. Two men emerged from shadows, advancing on Lucia. Santiago blocked her path, but something shifted in his expression. Internal warfare raged behind his eyes. Lucia recognized it immediately.
"You know this is wrong." Santiago's fists clenched.
He'd lived under Julian's control too long, but could he betray the man who'd saved him from hell years ago? Lucia understood this was the critical moment. Everything depended on Santiago's choice. She held his gaze, whispering with desperate hope, "You don't have to work for him anymore." Santiago gripped the gun tighter, hand trembling. Julian watched with cold confidence. "What will you choose, Santiago?" His voice carried absolute certainty of control. But Lucia's words penetrated deeper than Julian expected. "If you truly believe we're no longer family, then stand there and watch me die." Her voice rang with pain and challenge. Santiago closed his eyes briefly, then raised the gun. The shot exploded through the alley. The man holding Lucia dropped, blood spraying. She whirled toward Santiago, shocked. His eyes showed clarity for the first time in years. "I'm sorry, Lucia. I've been betraying myself too long." Julian's surprise lasted only seconds before he drew his own weapon. But Santiago moved faster. 2 shots struck Julian's shoulder and leg, sending him crashing down.
"You'll pay for this," Julian snarled through pain and rage.
Lucia grabbed the fallen man's gun, standing over Julian. Part of her wanted to end everything right there, but she refused to become like him.
"I won't kill you."
"But I'll take everything from you." She pulled out her phone, dialing a number she'd prepared long ago. Sirens wailed in response. Police flooded the alley, weapons drawn. Captain Ramirez approached, surveying the scene before focusing on Julian.
"You're Julian?"
Lucia nodded. "He's behind everything." The captain signaled his team.
"Arrest him!" As they dragged Julian away, his screams about power and ownership faded into nothing.
Lucia turned to Santiago.
"Are you okay?"
He dropped the gun with finality.
"I don't know." She placed her hand on his shoulder.
"At least now we can start over." Santiago managed a weak smile. "We still have Mateo. They found him just in time. Together they pulled him from the darkness that had held him captive for so long." Months later, a small restaurant opened on a quiet street. The sign read simply, "Hope." Lucia stood at the entrance watching street children file inside for hot meals. Santiago brought out plates while Mateo worked the register, wearing his first genuine smile in decades. Finally, they had a home.
A real family.